Here with you today at the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, to be sitting amongst such distinguished company, both in the audience and here on the stage as well. We have with us today representatives from several ministries, including the Ministry of Veterans Affairs, represented by the Deputy Minister, Mr. Alexander Tereshenko. We have a representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Political Director, Mr. Alexei Mikheyev, has made time to join us this morning. We have representatives of various companies who are corporate partners of this project that we're going to be introducing to you today. We have also representatives from the British Embassy and several members of the press. I thank you all very much for your time coming here today. The point of this presentation is to let you know that we're launching, together with the East Europe Foundation, we're launching a new project. The overall project is called All for One. An element of that project is called Lifeline Ukraine. My name is Paul Niland. I am the founder of Lifeline Ukraine. But what is Lifeline Ukraine? How did Lifeline Ukraine come into being? The person who should tell you that story, one of the first people, actually the first person in the story of Lifeline Ukraine, is Ukraine's acting Minister of Health, Dr. Ulana Suprun. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over the microphone to her. Thank you.
Дякую, доброго дня. Хочу подякувати Пол.
Thank you, Paul. First of all, I would like to thank you for your having taken this initiative, picked it up, so to say, from our hands. But let me tell you briefly how it all started. After the Maidan events, and the start of the hostilities in the eastern part of Ukraine, we started seeing the need for more active psychological support and assistance. Some programs were initiated with the participation of the U.S. Embassy, so that the social workers, the psychologists, and the priests could be sent to the United States to learn how such psychological assistance could be provided. But later on, we understood that there was no point in training all those people, like psychiatrists and even priests, if people do not visit them. Therefore, we started thinking about some other ways of providing such assistance. And a good friend of mine, whom I've known for 25 or 30 years, Mr. Petro Shmigel, who was a Ukrainian, who was born in the United States, like me, and he later relocated to Australia. He worked there for Lifeline Australia, a similar institution that has been in operation since 1963, I believe, and this is the institution, if I may say so, into which people can call, make phone calls in order to get some assistance in case they have some psychological disorders. And Petro came to Ukraine. We spoke, and I informed him about this idea of developing some program so that psychological health could be maintained in this country, supported through the support of the so-called veterans of these hostilities in the East, and also for the, if we may say, call them veterans of the Maidan, and also to the public at large in Ukraine. And I hope that we now can acknowledge, all of us, that we have all sustained psychological trauma as a result of those all those events. And when Petro informed me about Lifeline Australia, I got very much interested, and I contacted the members of Ukrainian community in Australia. And one of their specialists came to Ukraine. We held a press conference, and he developed some recommendations. He basically recommended that we took the protocols of Lifeline Australia, adapted them to the Ukrainian context, and started gradually materializing, so to say, this whole system here in Ukraine. and I talked to the director of Lifeline Australia itself and to the health minister of Australia, and we agreed that there would not only be the protocols translated for the Ukrainians in Ukraine, but also these translations could be used for the Ukrainians in Australia, so that everybody who could speak English and not speak English but could only speak Ukrainian could have this option. So the use of the protocols, and the next step was the trainers, and at our hotel we put a box to raise some funds, so people visiting us could put some money into that box. And in Australia, for example, the donorship funding is an important component, as along with the state or the public funding of this program. So health, psychological health, as we know, is a fairly intimate area, and people a lot of people might not believe, might not have enough trust about contacting somebody on the other end, so to say, of the telephone line, if they knew that those people were the government representatives or the public servants. So we decided that the format would be better if it's an NGO, and we established at the Ministry of Health the mental health department, but I also found in Paul some interest towards those issues that I decided to build upon. And Paul was looking for something else, something new in his life, and it coincided with our need to pick up our initiative to carry it forward, and therefore let me just give now turn the floor over now to Paul, and he would develop, he would elaborate on what I have already said. You should understand that this is a public-private partnership, but there are no interventions on the part of the government. Only when some assistance is needed, the Ministry of Health, and I hope that the Ministry of the Veteran Affairs could also add to what I said. So I thank everybody who has participated in that project. It has been developing for 2.5 years approximately, and I'm happy to say that it came to fruition. Finally, it came to fruition.
On the basis of the report that Ulana commissioned from Lifeline Australia that we began working, but let me just point out to you that when you know somebody like Ulana Suprun, and when you understand the hours that she puts in and the service that she has provided to the country, when Ulana asks you to take responsibility for something, no is not an answer. I had to do it. We then started to gather corporate partners. One of our first corporate partners is a law firm called Everlegal. Everlegal started providing us with pro bono legal services, and one of the first things that they advised us to do was to set up a very strong advisory board for Lifeline Ukraine. The advisory board consists of Katerina Yushchenko, who is the former First Lady of Ukraine, Natalia Yaresko, who's a former Finance Minister of Ukraine, Lydia Matyashik, who's also a very, very good friend of mine, a lovely lady with huge experience in working with NGOs, particularly working with USAID and organizations like that. Sergei Fomenko is also there. Actually, that photograph of him, you can't really see it, but I found that when I was preparing this presentation. He's actually standing in front of a wall by Mikhailovsky Sobor here in Kyiv, and that wall is a memorial to all of those Ukrainian heroes who have perished in the Russian war in and against Ukraine. The next person to join the advisory board, maybe you could stand up, Tusha, and just take a bow. Patricia Schmorhon-Havrelishian then asked to join us as well. And then the final addition to the Lifeline Ukraine advisory board is the same person that Ulana mentioned, who was at the very, very beginning of this project, Mr. Peter Schmeigel, who used to be the CEO of Lifeline Australia. So these are the people that I take advice from and who have become incredibly helpful. The next corporate partner to come on board is the Nico Motors Corporation. Sitting in the front row is Mr. Andrei Shelug, who is the CEO of the Nico Motors Corporation. Andrei, would you like to say a few words?
Just thank you.
If I may, when I started talking to Andrei about this project, he said something which it's not unique to him, it's not unique to me, it's something that is the reality for millions of us across this country, that he personally and his family has knowledge of the difficulties that veterans have after they return from serving their country, because his son-in-law is also a veteran as well. And so I'm grateful very much to Nico Motors Corporation for providing us with a home that we can operate from, and I thank you for your friendship as well. The next corporate partner that came on board was Vodafone Ukraine. We knew that we needed telecoms expertise, so Vodafone Ukraine came into the picture as well. And then I was contacted by a good-looking gentleman by the name of Victor Liakh. Victor and I have known each other for a while, and Victor contacted me and said that there was a funding opportunity available through the British Embassy, and he proposed that we join forces together, and a project that his team was already considering would be expanded to include Lifeline Ukraine. And so the East Europe Foundation became a part of the Lifeline Ukraine story, and I'll hand the microphone over to Victor now to tell his part.
Thank you, Paul. Розповідаючи свою історію.
Well, telling my part of the story, we have been active in support of small and medium enterprises. It's been one of our priorities, and we are trying to expand and to promote the activities of the small and medium enterprises. We also got interested in how to involve the veterans and use their abilities in those efforts. The rehabilitation efforts had been ineffective, to my mind, before that project was initiated, and one of the reasons was that professional approaches and professional expertise was needed for that. Because psychological services, the psychological services in the area of mental health, it should encompass also the other areas and the other services like social and other services that our patients or service receivers might need. Therefore, we decided to take part in this project because we saw an opportunity to offer our assistance and even jobs to those who called on that hotline, and thus promote resocialization, so to say, of those veterans, their inclusion into society and civilian life. Therefore, we can say that nowadays, we, by contributing to Lifeline, we develop something larger than just, a mere psychological support project. Let me also express our particular thanks to the Embassy of the United Kingdom in Ukraine, and our American partners for their contribution into the professional training and psychological coaching of our specialists. As you know, there have been very few researches on psychological assistance, especially to female veterans, of whom there are around 12,000 currently in Ukraine. And so we would like to make a research, and upon the results of that research, develop maybe some component of that rehabilitation program, psychological and social. We understand that the return of the veterans is a big social problem, and so we have organized a number of events so that the children of the families from which their male partners, their parents, left for the area of hostilities, for the children to be better ready for the return of those veterans home. And let me ask and invite, rather, the representatives of the small and medium enterprises, informing you that we need you, and my appeal is also to the representatives of the media. Please write, please inform about this set of problems. All the country needs this initiative, and I hope that this integration of these psychological services into the whole system of other services would could be organically arranged and organized and promoted.
And I will introduce our next guest, the next speaker. We reached out to the Ministry of Veterans Affairs and asked them whether they would endorse our project, and it is with great pleasure I introduce now Mr. Alexander Tereshenko, who is the Deputy Minister for Veterans Affairs for Ukraine.
Дякую.
Thank you. I am glad to participate, and not only as a deputy minister of the Veteran Affairs Ministry, but also the veteran myself. It's with particular grief that I can mention a friend of mine who, not being capable of readapting to civilian life, committed suicide last year. And therefore, I feel it with my heart that life is priceless, and it's difficult for many people to return from the war. We mentally continue to be there, and we face a number of problems that we cannot cope with by ourselves, and we need assistance. So this project is a good example, a bright example of social responsibility. Because the psychological health of a veteran is not only a problem for himself and for his family, but also for the whole society. And I hope that the ministry would be helpful in implementing your project, in assisting it, and the veterans the ministry is going to promote the launch of the veteran spaces, so to say. Because we also have this principle of mutual assistance by the veterans to each other, and it's important. And as a deputy minister in this capacity of mine, I express the ministry's readiness to sustain this project and endorse this project in all possible ways and with all possible means. Thank you very much for your assistance.
Together with the East Europe Foundation, we were then successful in our grant application to the British Embassy, and I now hand over to Helen Fazey, who is the charge d'affaires with the British Embassy here in Kyiv, to say a few words. But before you start speaking, I just want to say an enormous thank you to you and to everybody at the embassy, past as well as present. Simply without you, we would not be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And let me start by saying I'm really pleased that the British Embassy has been able to be part of this project. When we first saw the proposal, it immediately stood out to us as something that would have a real practical impact in Ukraine. So we came on board with this project in May when, the Ministry of Health and Veterans Affairs and all the partners that Paul has been talking about already had quite a developed idea about what they wanted to do. And as well as the clear need in Ukraine, part of our motivation for wanting to be part of this was influenced by the UK's experience of supporting our own veterans and the better understanding that we have been developing in recent years about the essential role of mental health in caring for veterans. So this is something that we have been putting a lot more effort into at home, and it therefore felt like a natural area into which we would extend the support that we are giving to Ukraine in helping people who are suffering from the consequences of the conflict. We know how important it is to have someone who can listen and help at the most dramatic times in a person's life. And I think it is better appreciated now that leaving the military is such a dramatic and even traumatic time, and that it can be a point in a person's life when they are more severely affected by some of the things that they have experienced while they were in service. So Lifeline Ukraine here is filling a gap as a first place that veterans can turn to if they are struggling and if they don't know where else to go to. A round-the-clock hotline that's going to provide psychological and mental support. And I think it's important that it is support from peers and from former comrades who bring their own perspective to what a caller is asking for, as well, of course, as the professional training that they have through this project. So yeah, I mean, we are grateful to everybody else who has done so much work in making this happen, and we're really proud to be part of the project.
Thank you. There's two small points actually that I just want to repeat from what Helen's just said. Number one is that this problem is not specifically a Ukrainian problem. Every country that has committed forces to go and fight, they're all facing the same kind of issues after their veterans return. This isn't a uniquely Ukrainian situation is one thing. But the other thing that Helen said that I thought was a really important point as well, when people leave military service, what has happened, or what then happens, is the support structures that they used to have gone suddenly. So when they're a part of their unit, when they're fighting, when they're deployed, there's a support structure, there's a command structure, there are orders, there are friends, there are people that they trust to the left and to the right. And then all of a sudden when they leave and they return to civilian life, that support structure is gone. And one of the things that Lifeline Ukraine does is it puts in place a support structure. And as Helen pointed out, and is coming in the presentation as well, the support structure is very much peer-to-peer, based on best international practices. So with the financial support of the British Embassy, Lifeline Ukraine got a home. We moved into our dedicated office space. The Lifeline Ukraine family started to grow, and we were joined by Ines and Yevgenia, two fabulous colleagues who I enjoy seeing every single day in the office. They are just wonderful, wonderful people, and I'm very, very grateful to you both. Where we are at the moment is we are actually recruiting the backbone of the Lifeline Ukraine team. I actually see sitting in the audience one of the people who I interviewed a few days ago and who potentially could be joining our team, so has showed up for the press conference as well today. Sorry? It's always a plus. It's always a plus. We are well advanced in the recruiting stage. We've interviewed over 40 people so far. The size of the final team will be around about 40 people because we need to have such a large staff. What's the word? Staff, sorry. We need to have a large number of staff to be I can't remember English now, to be able to operate around the clock, so people will be working in shifts. The training programs are prepared, and Lifeline Ukraine, as I said, based on best practices from around the world, is a peer-to-peer support structure. So most of our team will be veterans. And I just pressed the wrong button. Okay, no I didn't, I'm back. The Lifeline Ukraine mission and ethos. Our job is to save lives, full stop. It's why we're here. Our job is to save lives. In order to do that, we've asked some of the world's leading experts to come to Kyiv to work with us. One of those experts, actually the point of doing this press conference today on the 20th of August was because this lady, April Natural, was supposed to be flying here to begin our training. Unfortunately, though, she's in hospital right now. She's had to go in and have an operation. So what was supposed to be the second stage of training, a Canadian organization called Living Works, they will in fact be the first stage of training, and then when April has recovered, then April will be coming to Ukraine to work with our team. At that point, then another corporate partnership comes into play. Sitting also in the front row is Mr. Jesper Henriksen of the Radisson Hotels Group here in Ukraine, and the Radisson Hotels have kindly donated the conferencing space that we will need and the accommodation for our overseas experts when they come in. Jesper, thank you very, very much for your support. We're very grateful. So Living Works is the first stage of training that we will be doing. The program that they'll be delivering to our team is a program called START, and quite simply, I can't wait to start. We will, after that training is complete, be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Підмога завжди поруч. In the future, Lifeline Ukraine doesn't stop with helping veterans. The remit of the Ministry of Health isn't specifically about veterans, and in the second meeting that I had at the Ministry of Health, I was asked whether the foundation of Lifeline Ukraine could be created in such a way that in the future, and this really, Helen, this is the legacy that you are helping to build here. In the future, Lifeline Ukraine will go on to become not just a support structure for veterans, but it will be there for all Ukrainian citizens who find themselves in times of personal crisis. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for your partnership. Thank you for your support. And we will now open up the floor to any questions, should anybody have any.
Шановні гості, якщо маєте запитання до спікерів, прохання піднімати руку та представляти.
Dear friends, if you have, or dear guests, if you have any questions to the speakers, you are most welcome to raise your hand, introduce yourself, and ask your question. I would probably like to add a few more words. Paul and our Deputy Minister and the representative of Radisson Hotel chain, we are all connected, so to say, with each other because when the war started, the organization of the Patriots started medical training and started giving medical kits, emergency assistance kits taken from the NATO depots. And the bracelets, you remember there were some interesting bracelets in those kits. And Paul Spouse, by the way, is the one who designs those bracelets. And the next thing I wanted to mention that our Deputy Minister here of the VA Ministry and when we started simulations how to assist in training of our experts, there was an actor who enacted, so to say, embodied and played the role of a wounded person, serviceman. So for these simulations, the special rooms were needed, and Radisson is one of the hotels in Kyiv, which has rooms available. And so when this Defense of the Patriots or Protection of the Patriots organization, Захист ветеранів, turned to us for assistance, we turned in turn to Radisson, and the veterans also got some financial assistance. For example, their snacks, their meals were paid, and that's how this project, which the fact that I want to highlight, that this project can unite, can bring together a lot of people and I invite you to look at each other as your colleagues, your friends, and make another step. Ask your colleagues, ask your friends if they would be interested to cooperate with you, to work with you, to contribute something to this project. And if we have this cooperation, this mutual assistance becomes stronger and stronger, and even this very idea of Lifeline Ukraine was born through such cooperation. Thank you, Ulana, for having reminded of this project. Unfortunately, at the moment, I didn't know that we could even go into the bars, and everything was supposed to be paid, all our expenses there. But let me emphasize the fact that when I was playing an injured person, and I was without one of my limbs, without one of my hands, and the guys saw me, were terrified even at looking at me. I hope that this training for them would be more efficient, and I managed to save maybe a number of lives by successfully doing my work. Therefore, I'd say that this Lifeline project, it has produced, so to say, double effect. And let me say that our today's working days
Interviews going on today as well, more potential candidates. One of them, I'm very, very excited to meet this person. He's actually one of Ukraine's athletes who participated in the Invictus Games, and potentially he's another person who could be joining the Lifeline Ukraine team. Once again, I'm going to invite you to ask any questions that you may have, and if we don't have any, then I will just thank you all for your attention.
Доброго дня, Дар'я Мезенцева, телеканал «Прямий». А скажіть, будь ласка,
Premyi TV channel. Could you tell us how much money has already been allocated, and how much more money is going to be allocated for the funding of this project? And what are the plans for the immediate future? Maybe some more events, maybe some trainings for the veterans, and so on and so forth. Thank you for your question, and let me start by saying that in our work we uphold the transparency standards and openness standards. The funding, speaking about funding, I must say that we have a number of sources. The in-kind contributions, that these contributions are done by some of our partners, and they are difficult to assess in their monetary value. Could probably not be assessed readily, but the other contributions would be, for example, the availability of mobile phone lines or telephone lines at all that is provided for our project free of charge. And the grant that we received from the British Embassy amounted to £80,000. Pounds, and that was a big step for the initiation of our activity. In the future, we will be raising more funds, and that's why I would like to again invite you to cooperate with us in, disseminating the information about the project, and doing things that you can do. All aspects would be important for us.
So we have the first 2 initial training sessions, which will be from April when she recovers and she can make it to Kyiv, and from the Canadian Living Works organization. But also what we've done is we've identified a lot of further education courses in the sphere of suicide prevention. And so all of our team members, as well as the basic training, they will have ongoing training programs as well. And so, the way that we're looking at it is we expect that the night shifts are going to be the busiest times. That's when, from international experience, we know that we're going to be receiving most of our calls, but the team members will be working in shifts, sometimes a night shift, sometimes a day shift. And when they're working on a day shift, if it's a little bit of a quieter time, then that's when they can actually sit and they can go online and they can look at the other training courses that we've identified, and they can continue to build their skills so that they can help people more effectively. And Mr. Mikheyev at the front.
Дякую дуже, Пол. Віктор назвав одну.
Thank you, Paul. Victor mentioned one figure that seemed important to me, that there were 12,000 female participants to that war in the East, and I think that for both Ukrainian audience and the international audience, this figure is important for their imagination of the scale of these events. What are your assessment of a potential audience that you could render your services to? Well, I can tell you that the general figure is 392,000 veterans of what we call Russian-Ukrainian war, and for you to understand the scale of what's happening, we unfortunately do not have yet any reliable statistics on the number of suicides, but let me tell you that the situation is quite serious in this area.
Goes back to what I said when I introduced Andrei Sheluk from the Nico Motors Corporation. There are millions of us throughout this country who know veterans, who have veterans within our family. We've all seen many times the issues that they have with returning to civilian life, and that's why this needed to be a national project. It had to be.
Я думаю, також ваше питання про жінок-ветеранів. Зараз є велике зацікавлення, щоб допомогти.
Speaking about the veterans, female veterans, we need to understand the needs of female veterans, because they might have some different needs from their male, from the needs that differ from those of the male veterans. It's important for us first to understand the problems, and maybe we can get some more experience on how the female veterans are treated in the other countries. Maybe in Britain they have certain experience, have developed certain practices, but let me say that this number is the highest, the number of our participants in those facilities in our country is the highest in the world now. And as we know, at the beginning of those events, some of those veterans were not recognized as veterans. They were looked at as some cooks or some auxiliary staff. And so we hope that they need, if any of them need any safe place where they could speak up, so to say, speak openly, this project will help them. We also hope to develop some electronic services, a website, and that website will also maintain this hotline. And that would provide a, so to say, an all-encompassing, so to say, approach, complex approach, if you want. Because in the first 2 years, we all expected that the war would be over soon. It wasn't, and so we think that the operators should be, the experts should be well prepared to what they would hear speaking to the veterans, because there's going to be some heavy stuff that they might hear the veterans saying to them, and so we want to have them ready in all respects for this psychological assistance.
Ukraine team, the covering letter, which is a rare thing to get with a CV for a job application in Ukraine. This one actually had a covering letter. And the lady wrote, she said, "I'm not a veteran, I'm a psychologist, but my husband is a veteran." And so she kind of ticks both boxes that we need. Somebody who has an understanding of the issues that veterans face, but also has psychological training as well. And then in the beginning of the interview process, we actually found a few people who applied to us who were both psychologists and veterans as well at the same time. So what Ulana was just talking about is the difficult task working in a call center such as this, with the nature of the calls, with the kind of things that you're going to be discussing. We understood immediately, again from the report from Lifeline Australia, that putting into place a psychological support structure within Lifeline Ukraine, so not just the psychological support that we're offering to callers, but for our own team members. It was very, very important that we found somebody who would be there for our team. And that's, again, I'm looking at Zhenya. That is why Zhenya came on board. She was one of the first people that I spoke to. Zhenya is someone who I've known and respected and trusted for many, many years. But Zhenya is our resident psychological consultant. And so for each shift, there will be a shift manager. Each shift manager will have psychological education. And then they will communicate with Zhenya if they see one of the team members struggling to cope. If they see somebody who is maybe finding the work environment difficult, then they'll talk to Zhenya and we'll organize some kind of intervention, some kind of supervision, some kind of sessions to sit down and to help that person work through what it is that they're seeing in their daily working lives.
Я сподіваюся, що слово Lifeline ви вже згадали, тобто слідкуйте за Lifeline.
So let me only invite you to follow Lifeline Ukraine on Facebook, and all for one. Please also remember this logo. This is the name of our overall project. Its title. So we invite everybody who is interested in trying to assist, to help the other people. So we have developed this cooperation coaching training, and in Lviv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kyiv oblasts, we developed Donetsk Oblast, we developed the model for this Lifeline Ukraine initial stage operation. And then it will be spread via what we call veteran spaces throughout all of Ukraine.
Dickinson from both Business Ukraine magazine and the Atlantic Council.
I was about to say that, but anyway, thank you, Paul. First of all, congratulations to all. I think it's a very important project. It's very impressive that you've taken this initiative and achieved this. I would like to ask a little bit about the audience. Obviously, veterans, it's quite clear that Ukraine has a huge number of veterans who will potentially need these services and will benefit from that. And you mentioned in the future perhaps expanding it to the wider population. I was wondering, is it also open to the sort of what, if I could call it, a middle zone of people who are relatives of veterans, family members of veterans, friends of veterans? How will you address that? The people who are not themselves veterans but are impacted by the conflict in an indirect way?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. First of all, when we pick up the phone, when we answer a call in Lifeline Ukraine, there's not going to be any question, first of all, about the status of the person who's reaching out for help. You know, we're just there to provide support for people who need support when they need it. We're not going to be interviewing anybody. If somebody calls up Lifeline Ukraine and they might be the wife of a veteran, they might be an active duty serving soldier who is on the front lines, there's no discrimination. We're just there to help, and there's no may in the formulation of the sentence that we may expand in the future to cover other citizens. We will. That is a part of our mission. That is what we've created since the very beginning, because that was the request of the Ministry of Health.
Ще запитання?
Any more questions? If no...
In the time to be with us here today, and Slava Ukraini.